and welcome to the Sailing and Cruising the East Coast of the United States podcast. I'm Bela Musits.
And I'm Mike Wasserman.
Mike, today's guest on the podcast is Phil Haydon. Phil is a retired neuroscientist who has developed a not-for-profit called, or started a not-for-profit called, I'm tongue-tied. Phil has started a not-for-profit called Sailing for Epilepsy. And their goal is to raise awareness and build positive energy around people who have epilepsy, which, as you will find out from Phil, is a relatively common family of neurological issues that result in a wide range of physical, cognitive, and emotional challenges for people. I'll tell you, I learned a lot during my conversation with him, not only about Phil and his sailing background and all sorts of stuff like that, but all about epilepsy that I was not aware of. And sort of this learning and educating people about epilepsy is one of Phil's main goals in this Sailing for Epilepsy organization that he started.
Yeah, Bela, I couldn't agree more. I have both friends and family with epilepsy, and I still learned a lot from the conversation with Phil. It's an important topic. I think many of us, our listeners, will also have either first or secondhand knowledge of people with epilepsy. So yeah, I think we'll all learn a little bit more in the next half hour or so than we already know. Find out what Phil has been doing to reduce the stigma around epilepsy and make the world a better place for all of us by providing a vehicle for learning and conversation. So this is a cool talk. I hope people can kind of listen, keep their minds open, and maybe do some thinking and figure out some ways at the end to help Phil in his quest.
Yeah, I agree, Mike. So let's jump right into my conversation with Phil. Phil, welcome to the podcast.
Well, thanks so much for having me. I look forward to our conversation.
Hey, so let me ask you a question. If you're at a social event, and it's an event where people don't know you,
yeah,
and you get introduced to somebody, and after that introduction, they say to you, "Oh, very nice to meet you, Phil. What do you do?" How do you answer that question?
What a great question, and it depends on the type of event. But one of the things I'll say, I try to help people.
Mm-hmm.
What I mean by that is, what I'm trying in my now recently retired life is to give back to the community. And in particular, I try to help people who have epilepsy, which is a disability that I have and I acquired when I was 15 years of age through a head injury. And epilepsy is a very stigmatized disability, and people don't like to talk about it. Well, I'm a neuroscientist. If I can't talk about it, who can? So in my more recent years, I've decided it's time to talk. And I try to use my sailing as a tool to inspire people with epilepsy to live fuller lives, but also as a tool to educate other people who don't know about epilepsy.
Yeah. So now you run a Sailing for Epilepsy organization. Can you tell us about that a little bit?
Yeah, Sail for Epilepsy, its mission is twofold. One, inspiring people with epilepsy to live as full a life as they can in their disability. And the second is to educate people. For example, people don't realize that 1 in 26 people will develop epilepsy in their lifetime. And 1 in 10 people will have 1 or more seizures in their lifetime. There's staggering numbers. We don't talk about it.
Wow.
Yeah, and there are actually quite famous people who have epilepsy. Danny Glover, the actor, for example, a quarterback who's a current quarterback, Justin Fields, who came from Ohio State. He has epilepsy, and I try to talk about this, the causes, but importantly, first aid. What do you do if somebody has a seizure? And most people really don't know.
Yeah, yeah. So describe to me, I know very little about epilepsy. So describe to me a little bit of what the disease is, how it impacts you, how it impacts an individual.
Yeah. So epilepsy is merely an alteration in electrical activity of the brain. And there are probably 40 plus different types of epilepsy, different causes, different manifestations of the epilepsy. So it should be called the epilepsies. And what I call the Hollywood epilepsy or seizure is this is where the change in electrical activity occurs across the whole brain. We lose consciousness, fall to the floor, and have violent motion of the limbs and body. These are tonic-clonic seizures. But there can be other forms of epilepsy. For example, an absence seizure. And in an absence seizure, as the name suggests, you become absent, but you don't lose consciousness. So if I were to have an absence seizure during this conversation, you might ask me a question, I may start talking, and then I would just pause for 20 seconds. I'd still be looking at you, but I wouldn't actually be speaking or responding. And then I would just pick up.
Mm-hmm.
And so there is a very focal change in electrical activity in the brain. Another type of seizure, maybe, depending on where the altered electrical activity is in your brain, that determines the manifestation. For example, there are parts of the brain that are involved in sensing smell. As you can envision, if you were to have an alteration in activity in that part, you might perceive smells even though the odor is not present. So it's a range of types, but also a range of causes. And in general, I can classify the causes. There's genetics, so you inherit it through your genes. Head injury, which is how I had epilepsy. Stroke can induce epilepsy. Brain infections can induce epilepsy. And so we all have the potential to get it. And you can get it at any time of your life. If you don't have epilepsy today, it doesn't mean you don't develop it tomorrow.
Wow. And I can imagine that there's various different degrees of severity.
Yes. Yeah, that's a very good point. Different degrees of severity, and 2/3 of the population with epilepsy gain medical control. 1/3 never gain medical control, which is really unfortunate. And some of this, if you didn't know I had epilepsy, you wouldn't know unless I told you. But there are other people who have developmental disorders associated with their epilepsy, and it can be seen as a very severe changes in their behavior. There are other people who have hundreds of seizures per day, and it really impacts their daily life. And one of the messages I try to give to people, regardless of the severity, is what can you do to live a fuller life? The fullest life possible in your disability.
Yeah. And when people manage it, is that with medication, or is it with is it surgically managed, or talk
Yeah,
to me
there
a
are
little bit about that.
many different forms of management. The frontline approach is try medications, of which there are more and more being developed. But there's also, if the source of the seizure is very localized and in a part of the brain that we can perform the surgery, then surgery can be a solution. There's other methods. There's a nerve called the vagal nerve, and you can have stimulators on the vagal nerve. And when you can have an electrode to record the beginning of a seizure, and as the electrical activity is detected, you'll get a stimulation of the vagal nerve, which can then suppress the seizure. Surprisingly, the first method to impact or control seizures was diet. And I'm talking hundreds of years ago. And, in a recent fad in the, diet is always a fad, right? What's the latest one? But you hear of the keto diet. Well, the ketogenic diet was the first method that was effective for treating seizures. Importantly, when I say ketogenic diet, I mean no carbohydrates. So I call it the bacon, mayonnaise, and avocado diet. And with children, this can be very effective. A physician may try medications. They're not successful. Then they bring on the ketogenic diet, seizures stop.
Wow.
But if that child, they want a candy bar, they go and take a bite of a candy bar, boom,
Right.
they go back into seizures. So something about changing the source of energy for the brain.
Huh.
Yeah. And there's a lot of investigation ongoing now is how does the ketogenic diet work? Because this may allow us to piggyback new pharmacological interventions that would allow us to develop new drugs.
Yeah, that's fascinating. That's fascinating. So let's link this to sailing now. You know, there's several of these organizations that I've heard of for sailing for veterans, sailing for PTSD. They seem to populate two areas: sailing and fly fishing. and I do both of those, so maybe that I'm just aware of those because I do both of those things. But so what is it? Let's say I called you up and I said, Phil, I heard your podcast, and I have a nephew that has epilepsy, and I think, you know, I'd love to get him involved in your organization. Walk me through how that process would work.
Yeah. So maybe the first approach is to say, what do we actually do related to sailing and epilepsy? And the sailing aspect is I'm using it on number one, I'm using it as a tool to inspire people to say, look, I have epilepsy and I want to sail the oceans of the world. And I'm going to find a way that I can achieve this despite my disability.
Yes.
So I then use that and say, now what can you do despite your disability to do more in your life? So that's one aspect of it. But then what I do is I do storytelling. So we have something called the One More Step Challenge, which is what can you do? Take one more step for life. And people sign up. We have now people signed up in 38 states, 22 countries. And when they sign up, we put their first name on the hull of the boat. They become virtual shipmates.
Oh, wow.
And then when I'm sailing, if they've given permission, I tell their story, not my story. It's their story. And Tyler, for example, in South Africa, he had a lot of problems coming to terms with his epilepsy. And his parents signed him up to learn to play the drums. And so we started playing the drums. And I do the Bermuda 1-2, the solo double-handed race. And as I'm racing to Bermuda, between storms, I make a little video about Tyler. And I talk about him, and I ask Tyler some questions. You know, what type of music do you like? What type of drums do you play? I send it back to shore, and somebody puts together a real video. And when I got to the marina at the end of the race, there was a video back from Tyler and his mom. And so we put this out, and this helps through other people's voices to tell people with epilepsy, you can do more. And more recently, we have set up a One More Step grants program because, as you said, there's a range of disabilities. And with some of the severely impaired people, only one parent can work. They need to be home at care of their child. And there can be severe income restrictions. So we've been giving small grants out to help people actually do something. So we have one recently where there's a recent video online where a young girl who's still having active seizures, she wanted to ride a horse. And so we gave a small grant, and her mom was with her, and she got on horseback. But what are the safety guardrails needed for her? So she had people caring for her on either side of the horse in case she had a seizure while she's riding. It's just these wonderful stories of people overcoming a challenge. And so when I'm sailing, I try to tell their stories and then get people involved in giving us their information and their voices about helping others. But another part to what we do is I like to go out and give educational presentations. And I say, you know, sailing is the hook and epilepsy is the message. So I do many Rotary Club presentations. And, you know, I'll talk about how my story with epilepsy, how I got involved in sailing, what I do with sailing, and, you know, the virtual shipmates, for example. But then I give them statistics, as I did to you, about 1 in 10 will have one or more seizure. And people's faces just, it's like, are you serious? But then always somebody starts talking, oh, my cousin, my sister, and it becomes a conversation. And then I ask, do you know what to do if someone has a seizure? So we now have epilepsy first aid cards online, which are translated into 18 different languages. We're having them downloaded all around the world. And they're just little simple steps that we are teaching. And we teach this as well while I'm sailing. And so despite being I would say, slightly competitive, my wife would say severely competitive. When I'm racing, I actually try to give these messages and teaching about this disability.
Yeah. So you're using sailing as sort of a vehicle
Yes.
to get the message out,
Exactly.
to get people informed.
Yes.
And
So what's quite interesting now, I was down on my boat. My boat, by the way, is called Fearless. And it's a very purposeful name, as you can tell. It's telling people, fearless. See what you can do. I was down on Fearless yesterday, putting the cover on and doing the constant, winter jobs. And one of the local vendors who works with me came along and they started talking about a recent video we shot. We're educating people who never have exposure to epilepsy. And they're asking questions like you asked me. Oh, tell me about epilepsy. And let's try and educate the public.
Yeah. Yeah. So what is the largest misconception about epilepsy?
It depends where you are in the world. But let's talk about in some countries, it's thought that epilepsy is caused by the devil. We actually sailed across the Atlantic Ocean, making all the videos and having our sailing exploits, that call it. And one of the countries we visited was Morocco. And even though this is a relatively westernized African country,
Yes,
75% of the families who develop epilepsy in their family seek a traditional medical healer as their first approach to dealing with this seizure disorder. And there are herbal remedies that are available. It's quite, so in, that's one of the areas. A misconception, let's say more close to home, is what do you do if someone has a seizure? I remember, first, are you taught anything? If you are, it's often incorrect. People will say, oh, they're going to swallow their tongue.
right.
It's physically impossible to swallow your tongue. So there is also this misconception. Oh, put something in their mouth. No, please never put anything in the mouth, because if you try and put something in someone's mouth, they're going to bite your finger off, potentially, or you're going to damage their teeth. Don't do that. What you need to do is just some very simple first aid. You move objects around from the person if they're having a tonic-clonic seizure to prevent them as they're kicking their legs. You don't want them to kick a table. Move the table. You don't want a secondary injury. If, when possible, turn them on their side. If you've got a coat with you, just wrap it and put it under their head so their head's not hitting the floor. And very importantly, be with them when they regain consciousness. Because I can tell you, when I regained consciousness, when I was having the confusion is incredible. I don't know I just had a seizure. I remember I was on my way to a job interview for a summer job when I was a student. And I remember waking up on the sidewalk and there were 8 people looking at me and I'm thinking, wow, what's going on here? And over the course of 1 to 2 minutes, it just started coming back to me. I have what's called an aura, a sensation prior to me losing consciousness.
Yes.
I just then remembered the aura. And at this point, I'm very confused. I'm exhausted. And understandably, the adults who were there didn't know what to do. They were a little panicky. I'm exhausted and I'm confused. And I'm trying to calm these people down while I'm laying on my back with scrapes on my skin and console the person. Most of the time, you don't even need to call medical attention. Although, if you're not certain, call for medical assistance. But so long as the seizure lasts less than 5 minutes, and it's not the first seizure, medical attention is not normally needed.
Yeah. How do they diagnose this? Is there a blood test or some type of...
There's no blood test. Really, the way it's diagnosed is initially observation. What occurred?
I see.
Did if somebody, lost consciousness, they fell to the ground, they had these movements, they then try, what will happen is they may do, depending on what medical facilities you have, they may do a brain scan. And actually, in aging population, first seizure is often the first indication of a brain tumor.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so the brain tumor is growing is actually problems with the neurons in the brain, and this manifests in a seizure. You have a brain scan, it's like, oh, we got a tumor. But the classic way of officially diagnosing is with measuring the electrical activity of the brain. But for that to be successful, you have to have a seizure whilst in.
Yeah.
And so, often that doesn't happen. So it's really the behavioral manifestation of what occurred. And so what I tell the people when they are asking this question, I say, if you're having what may or may not be a seizure, keep a journal.
Yeah.
And have your people around you recording what's seen, so that when you then go to a physician or a neurologist, you can actually give them the journal. And rather than relying on memory of what happened, it can be a very good source for diagnosis by the physician.
Yeah. Is there like a physical activity that helps minimize or being very active versus being sedentary? When we talked about diet, right, as sort of one way that has been used to manage things, is there physical activity that can help in that regard also?
Not to my knowledge, no. And I think just being generally physically active when possible is good for one's overall health, of course. But no, not to my knowledge.
Okay. Interesting. Now, I just want to talk a little bit about this notion of have you taken people with epilepsy out sailing? I mean, is that something that you also try to introduce people to this activity?
So far we have not. Yes, I've taken people with epilepsy because I know them, they know me, and we have the conversation. There are people who say, and I say, well, let's go out together. But it's dependent on the degree of disability. It may be a significant risk, and there's a lot of liability issues. So we're currently over the winter looking into the liability issues of what we can and cannot do.
So currently, that's really not your mission. Is
out of our mission, yes. Although one thing I want to do in the next couple of years is I do a lot of racing. And I want to form, I'll call it, the epilepsy team, where every sailor on the boat has epilepsy.
Oh, that'd be kind of neat.
Yeah, and these would be people with epilepsy who are willing to speak about it. It needs to be, disclosable, and they're going to be people who already sail, just to introduce them. And I have a list of 5 people at the moment, and we're talking about this, and I think it would be really great if we can do one of our local races. And I've also been working with a yacht club where I'm trying to set up a regatta, and I'm just calling it, Race for Disabilities. And the idea is each boat would identify a disability that they're associating themselves with, and they could raise funds towards a foundation in that disability. I would have, mine would be epilepsy, but every sailor, or every person, I should say, is connected to a disability in some way, through their family or through their individual network. And I think it's important that, in addition to going out and enjoying the sport, that we should also be thinking of other people and seeing how we can help. So this is one of the things I'm working on at the moment. Yeah.
So if people listening to this say, hey, this sounds like a great organization, I'd like to contribute, or I'd like to get involved, what should they do?
Okay, so our website is sailforepilepsy.org, and it's just as it says, Sail for Epilepsy. We're also on social media, all of the channels, including TikTok, but I do not do TikTok dances. And you can follow along there. On the website, there's a donate button. You can also submit questions, and submit a question and just say, hey, I would love to get involved, and it will come to me and I will respond. And I'd love to find as many people as possible who want to help on this. We're getting connections. As I said, we have virtual shipmates in 22 countries, and we're trying to expand the network. I have sailing friends. I grew up in the UK, so we have a strong connection there. I have sailing friends with epilepsy in the UK, and you'd actually be surprised how many sailors have epilepsy. They just don't talk about it.
Yeah.
In fact, last year I did the double-handed Newport to Bermuda race, and in Newport, as I was getting Fearless ready, I had several sailors coming up, and when nobody was around, say, "Hey, Phil, I'm so and so. I also have epilepsy. I'm doing the race." Also, when we're in Bermuda, the same.
Yeah.
I also get messages from people saying, "I have epilepsy. I sail. Should I tell the skipper?" And there's lots of.
That's interesting. As you bring that up, there's some diseases or afflictions that we get that we sort of wear proudly.
Yes,
right? We almost we talk, and that's great. People talk about it, right? They're very open about it. I'm a cancer survivor. I've done this, and then there's other things like epilepsy that sort of people don't really talk about. It's kind of silent, right?
You just push it aside, and that's my personal goal. Is I'm speaking about it, and if by me speaking about it allows another person to learn or another person to speak, I think there's a victory. And actually the Newport Bermuda race were incredibly supportive of us. I have somebody who's very good on the social media and video front, and they connected to the person in Newport Bermuda race who was taking care of that aspect, and they were communicating back and forth, sending videos. The race was this. I'll use the word promoting the videos that we were sharing. It was they were very supportive. I was really pleased to see it.
Yeah, excellent. And I imagine if I'm at home listening to this and I'd say, oh, I'd love to have Philip come talk to our yacht club or organization. Again, they should go to the website, sailforepilepsy.org, and they can contact you there.
Yes. And another way, direct by email, is if they use info@sailforepilepsy.org, the email will come straight to me.
Perfect.
Info is easier than spelling out my whole name.
Yes. Yeah. So I want to start wrapping this up, Phil. Is there anything I haven't asked you that you'd like to sort of share with our listeners?
I think the most important thing is compassion.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter whether it's epilepsy, autism, Alzheimer's disease, whatever. We're all human beings. And what happens with me, I have medically controlled epilepsy now. It's been controlled for over 40 years. What happens when I have a seizure, or one of my people with epilepsy, when we have a seizure, it's just there's something not working quite correctly in our brain. There are other people where cells in their kidneys don't work properly, and that has a consequence, or in their liver, and it just happens to be it's in my brain.
Right.
I'm a human being. We're all the same. None of us have the 100% perfect cell in every organ of the body. So let's support one another, and let's just help each other.
Yeah, excellent. That's a great summary. Phil, thank you so much for being on the podcast. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Yeah, thanks very much. It's been a pleasure to be here.
Bela, what a great interview, an interesting human, and a fascinating topic. I love Phil's idea of combining one's interests and passions in different ways in order to make the world a better place. And Phil's kind of hit this spot on. What are your main takeaways?
Yeah, it was kind of cool the way he uses sailing as the vehicle to sort of help raise awareness about epilepsy, right? You think in your brain, what does sailing and epilepsy have to do with each other, right? And Phil has used it as sort of the vehicle to get people engaged, because his goal is to educate people about epilepsy, and so I just thought that was kind of cool, the way he sort of did that. And some people dive into these causes, which is absolutely wonderful. My hat's off to people who do this. And some like Phil sort of raise awareness and educate people. Some people raise money, and other people, and there's other organizations that sort of get individuals engaged in activities that they typically would not be involved with. And it's I think all of these things are marvelous. And I also feel that all of us should do at least one thing. We should take one part of our life, whatever it is, where you're giving back to mankind in whatever way works for you, right? For some people, that's donating money to certain organizations. For people like Phil, it's starting Sail For Epilepsy. And so there's a lot of ways to get engaged, but I think as human beings, we owe that to our fellow human beings, that we should take one part of our life where we're giving back. And particularly for, those of us who oftentimes, just because of where we were born and the country and the place we were born in, are really privileged. And so I think we have a duty to sort of give back. So enough on my soapbox, but I just think that, Phil's a great example of that. And it's sort of a non-traditional way of looking at it. And it's one that, from his perspective, takes a ton of time, right? I mean, he is really into this. It'd be probably a lot easier just, to write a check once a year to the Epilepsy Foundation and say, okay, I did my thing, which is fine. I'm not knocking that at all. That's a wonderful thing to do, and it's necessary. But he's taken this different path. So I think that's really neat. What do you think, Mike?
Yeah. Just to, again, I don't know if it's the same soapbox or a slightly different soapbox right next to your soapbox, Bela, but couldn't agree more. And yeah, writing a check is great. If you've got extra money, it's great to share it with causes and people that need it. But it's this idea that I think, we've got listeners all over the world. There's lots of bad news, and we're getting, I think, bombarded with negativity in lots of ways. I mean, put your phone down, right? Stop scrolling, right? And go interact with other humans in a way that makes their life better. And whether that's sailing, like what Phil's doing, or just spending some time to go spend time with somebody, or going and helping clean a neighbor's yard up, whatever it is, right? Just go sit and have a coffee or a tea. There's all kinds of cool programs that let you help other humans directly. This is a great example of finding a direct way to help humans and use something that you already enjoy to make it happen. Again, it's soapboxy, I get it, but it's something that I do, and I spend time with other humans, right? And I do things that are outside my job and outside my responsibilities to try to make people's lives better. And it's not a big commitment, it's not a big deal, but I think it's something that everybody can do, and I think it's a great antidote to negativity or feeling depressed about what's going on in the world right now. Just do it. To just make a small difference in somebody's life is an awesome and amazing thing. So yeah, same soapbox. I don't know, but I'm with you, Bela, 100%.
Yeah. Something you said there, it's sort of, people who listen to this podcast and our other podcasts know I'm on a ski patrol, which means I help as a volunteer. I help people who get hurt when they're skiing, and some of those people get hurt pretty seriously. And as you were saying all of that, it just reminded me of sort of the dopamine hit I get after take care of somebody who's injured, and we've, taken care of them. We've gotten them down off the hill. We've gotten them off to the hospital, et cetera. So there's personal satisfaction you get from this as an individual, which I think, at least for me, that not only do I know I'm doing good, I'm helping somebody, but I get this additional sort of dopamine hit that really moves me from that. After one of those situations, I always feel good, right? No matter how I felt 2 seconds before, I started I got the call on the radio to say, hey, got to go help somebody. By the time I'm done, I feel great. I feel great about life. I feel great about all sorts of stuff. So I just think that's kind of neat. So anyway,
And it's way better
Yes.
than watching any cat videos on TikTok or
Yes.
in playing any video game, you name
That's
it.
right.
This idea of actually, again, not everybody has the opportunity to do this, to do what you do or do what I do, but whatever you can do physically or emotionally, right, to spare a little bit of time to try something like this, can't encourage you enough to do this. And I know this is not the kind of stuff that you and I usually talk about, but Phil really has motivated us to have this conversation, right? And hopefully listeners think about it and say, hey, how can I invest some time, half an hour a week, right, in doing something for a relative, a friend, a neighbor, a community organization, right? You pick and do it,
Right. I think of when you help people, the dopamine I talk about I think about that as a real dopamine. It's not artificial. The stuff I get on TikTok is artificial dopamine. Right?
Yep.
This is real dopamine. So let me try to bring this back. So
Yep.
I think whenever you want to get people engaged or you feel strongly about something, I think the first step in getting people involved is making them aware of the challenge and helping them see how they can contribute to help that community. That's the first step. And I think that's what Phil's doing by this education piece. So I think the education piece is really important. Education or awareness is really important because that's the first step in getting people engaged, right? If they say, oh, wow, I didn't realize this problem was so big. Maybe for me, it's writing a check. Maybe for me, it might be I can invest some time, or maybe I can do something else. So that I think is sort of the grass. That's where it starts. That's at the grassroots where it starts. I know, when people ask me to donate to a particular cause, I want to learn more about the cause. I want to educate myself, right, to see if I want to do that. So I think that's really important. The other interesting thing, Mike, is that I'm much more familiar. I never really thought about this the way Phil has made me think about it, right? As sort of this kind of grassroots education awareness piece. Programs that I'm more familiar with are getting the individuals who have a disability or an illness engaged with a particular activity, right? So sailing, there are groups that get people who are in wheelchairs out sailing. There's organizations that get individuals who are confined to wheelchairs out skiing. So that's sort of more of a direct engagement with the disabled person or the person who's ill. And those are great. There's a organization that gets veterans who are struggling out fly fishing, right? And some of these things are solo activities. Some of these things are group activities. So there's the value in getting a group of like-minded folks together. But again, all of these things kind of have their roots in awareness and education. And then when that happens to me, I say, oh, I want to get involved in that. How can I get involved? But first you got to educate me. And I think that's what Phil's doing. I think that's the neat thing about what he's doing.
Yeah. And even the idea of having a race or an open house to support and welcome people or to raise a little bit of money, right? You might write a check for, X hundred, right? But if you can sponsor something that will get X thousand, right? By investing 10 hours of your time, all of a sudden that's pretty cool. So yeah, I think this is a nice prompt for people to be creative and to figure out how to raise awareness. And there's probably lots of tools at people's fingertips that they weren't probably directly aware of. And this kind of conversation with Phil, I think, kind of maybe will spur some creativity amongst our listeners.
Yeah, exactly. So what do you think? Wrap this one up, Mike?
Sure. Listeners, thanks again for joining us for yet another episode. We hope you found our conversation with Phil motivating, interesting, and thought-provoking, just like obviously we did. And in general, we'll end with contacting us as always invited. Please feel free to send us an email at sailingtheeast. That's all one word at gmail.com.
And finally, if you enjoyed the podcast, please hit that like button on your favorite podcasting application. You can also find us on YouTube now. And if you know of someone that would be a good guest on the show, reach out to us and let us know. We'll invite them on. So that's it for today's episode. Hope to see you out there on the water soon. So until next time, signing off from upstate New York. See you all soon.
And from over here in Münster, Germany, auf Wiedersehen. Thanks for listening, and see everybody next time.